Hey there, jet ski fans, and welcome to another video. Yes, I'm still waiting on the cylinders for the 1100 triple swap, and it has still been not very nice outside. So I've been in the garage doing some modifications that I've been wanting to do for a while on the X2. I don't think I mentioned it, but I had planned on doing some work on the 750 Xi Super Sport, a little bit of work on the trailer, and I hoped to get it out and do some testing. But like I said, the weather has been pretty poor. I did manage to get 3 or 4 small modifications done to the X2 that I've been wanting to do for a while, so that is good news. The other good news is that I've shaved a little bit more weight, and it works even a little better than it did before. Let me show you what I've done. Let me show you what I've done. Let me show you what I've done. Why is that so hard to say?
I'm looking at this right now, and I think it is entirely unacceptable that this piece is made out of a giant chunk of stainless steel that has a stainless steel nut and a stainless steel arm. And so I think this piece is going to have to get rebuilt. I've got this chunk of 6061 aluminum that I got quite a long time ago, and I'm going to turn this chunk of aluminum into this. I've cut off a chunk of aluminum and now it is in the mill. I've marked out some crosshairs here, and I am going to drill an 8mm hole, 5/16 all the way through this part, and that is going to be the center of the hole for the shaft. The outside of it down so far so that I still have enough left for an arm. Now that I've got it marked in the lathe, I know where I can safely remove material, and so I've put it back into the mill vise rather, and I've got a 3/4 inch end mill, and I'm going to hog a bunch of material off of this really quickly. Then we'll put it back in the lathe and do the final touches. Now finished everything that I need to do in the lathe, so I'm going to take it out of here, and I need to figure out the location of where the ball joint goes and drill and tap a hole. As you guys can see, I drilled and tapped the hole. I now have the ball joint threaded in there. So now what I need to do is make the end of this a square, just like this one, so that I can put the plate on. Here it is. I've got the square piece cut on the back side of it. And I can tell you guys already, I'm not finished this. I'm still going to shave some weight off of it. And it is already less than half of the weight of the original part. So as you guys can see, it is hooked up. The linkage is hooked up there. And I could simply run a bolt all the way through here and pinch everything together, and it would be good to go. But I'm actually going to do some modifications like I've already said. I'm going to take a little bit more material off here because it doesn't need to be there. And I'm also going to thread the inside of this so that I can use a bolt. Depends what's lighter actually. I might run a bolt all the way through, a 6mm bolt, or I might use a short 10mm bolt with a washer just to hold everything together. Despite having a mill and a lathe and some other fancy tools, sometimes you got to go a little bit old school and break out a file. I'm now copying this piece. I've already got this hole drilled out and I've got this hole drilled, but now I need to make it square. I could try to line this up in my mill and use a 1/8 end mill to try to make that square. But what I'm going to do instead is go old school and use this file. I know what you're thinking. You can do a bit of a hack job with a file, but how good of a fit can you actually get? Here's the answer to that. I just pushed it on with my fingers and I can't get it off unless I actually get behind it and pry it with a screwdriver. It fits pretty well, I'd say. There we go. I need a way to bolt the outer arm on, and so I've come up with this. I've drilled out the hole on the back side so that it is about 10mm, and that is going to allow me to press the head of this bolt in. So I'm going to put the bolt in this way and press it in so that the other end of it sticks out through the hole. And it should lock itself into place well enough that I can tighten the nut on. What I'm going to do beforehand is clean this up really good and put some high strength Loctite on it before I push it together. In order to push the bolt in, what I'm going to do is use a 3/8 drive Allen key. I'm going to open up my vise, put the whole thing in the vise with the bolt in here like this with some Loctite on it. And then I'm going to squeeze the whole thing in the vise. In order to make sure that this doesn't get damaged, I'm going to put the arm on here so that it doesn't mushroom out the end. If you guys enjoy this crazy content as much as I enjoy making it, be sure to drop a like on the video. It helps. This is the setup that I've come up with for pushing this together. I haven't tried it obviously because the bolt's not pushed in. So let's give it a go. I'm going to put the bolt in there. I've got this 3/8 drive. And then I'll try to get my hand out of the way. We've got a socket over here. The vise is going to have to open up just a little bit more. So we've got this socket, and that is going to allow me, actually I'm going to put it this way because there's a bit more surface area on the aluminum. That'll hopefully stop it from marring up the aluminum too much. But now I'm going to tighten up the vise and hopefully push the bolt all the way through the part. Oh yeah, seems to be going well. Yes, I did cut my thumb, and I did put red electrical tape on it, but that's not what I'm trying to show you guys. I'm trying to show you guys that you can clearly see the marks from the outside of the bolt where it engaged with the inner walls of the part that I made. So it is basically the perfect size, perfect fit. The outside of the bolt, even without Loctite, will engage quite well with the outer walls, and so that means I can tighten a nut on here without worrying about it slipping. Here it is, basically the finished part. I can still probably shave a few grams off this, but I am excited to weigh it and see how much it weighs compared to the other one. So what we'll do first is weigh this old one. 6.1 ounces, 174 grams. Now, let's see how much this weighs. 69 grams. 2.4 ounces.
The parts are now completed and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. Really happy with how much weight I saved, and I'm now going to install it, show you guys how easy it goes on and how well it fits. I'm also noticing that my return limit washer, let me explain. So this whole setup has been modified to work with my lever here. Ordinarily, you just have a dial on here that locks into a few different positions. So what I did, because there was no way to lock it into place, I used this stack of stainless steel washers and this bolt to basically stop it from returning. I'll just start installing this and show you guys what I'm talking about. So this installs in through here, in through some plastic bushings, goes in very nicely, and then you just snap it into place on the ball joint thing. I don't know what that's actually called. And then this arm I've made, it actually goes, yeah, it goes that way. And it's made so that when it returns, the cable pulls it this way. And when it returns, due to pump pressure, it hits these washers, and that's what determines what angle it stops at. So when I pull the lever, the pump nozzle points up on the back, and that makes the front want to come up out of the water. And when I let it go, it returns to level. But because there's nothing actually holding the nozzle in place or locking it in place, basically I use these washers to limit where it returns to. So now that I have the arm in place, I've got this stainless steel washer I put on here. I need that there because the hole is too big to just use a nut. Thread this nut on here, tighten this up, and it is made so that the thickness of this plate is the depth of the shoulder, or the square part that it engages with. And so I can tighten this up without worrying about it locking up on the actual mechanism. And all I need to do now is put this little barrel thing. This is a BMX part. I think you can get them for other things, but this was made by Odyssey. I don't think they make them anymore. You put this through here, and then I take my cable, put it through. I take a 10mm wrench and hold on the backside, tighten this up, and then when I pull my lever, it pulls the cable, which will make the nozzle go up on the back. I said up on the back and I pointed down. It will make the nozzle go up on the back, which makes the front of the jet ski go up. Over here I have some scrap aluminum bits. I've got another container here, and inside of this container I have a bunch of these cut-offs, these plugs that I cut out of the Jet Ski Brothers V8 manifold. And so I can take these, or one of these, put it in my lathe, drill a 8mm hole in it, and I will have an aluminum washer. Once I have a hole in it, I can then use that hole to mount it on a bolt, and then I can turn the outside to whatever diameter I want. So I have replaced these stainless steel washers, 0.7 ounces, which is 21 grams, with this washer, which is 0.2 ounces, 8 grams. And I could very well just mount this onto the jet ski using the bolt that I took off. It's a reasonable bolt in my estimation. It's not too long, it doesn't stick too far through, it has enough thread engagement. But this bolt weighs, I believe, 11 grams. Let's pop it on the scale.
That bolt is 11 grams, which is 0.4 ounces. And I have this barrel adjuster with a hole through it. I put that barrel adjuster in the lathe and turned down the end that held the cable. And then I cut the other end off shorter because it doesn't need to be that long. Let's pop these two on the scale now and see what the difference is. 4 ounces, 11 or 12 grams. This one, I haven't weighed this yet, so I don't know. 0.2. What was this? 0.4? Yeah, so twice as much. 8 grams. 11 grams. So it's more accurate in the grams, I would say. When you work around a lathe or a mill, you're constantly ending up with metal shavings in your shoes and everywhere else. So I had planned on making the hole in this off center so that this would be adjustable, but I figured I would leave well enough alone. This system has worked quite well for me. If I notice any problems with it, or I want to try to get a maximum amount of speed out of this and play with the trim, then I guess I could change some stuff. But for now, I think I will just leave it as is. So we'll just thread this in. This doesn't need to be crazy tight, and it doesn't take a lot of force. It would take a heck of a lot of force to shear that bolt off. It is an 8mm bolt. I had a spring on this at one point to help it return, and I found that it wasn't necessary. So the spring actually fell off, and that's how I found out it wasn't necessary. But it feels really weird when there's no water flowing through it because it doesn't return. It just feels really muddy and kind of gross. But as soon as you're riding, yeah, the nozzle is trying to go straight all the time. So anytime you pull the lever, it's trying to get forced back straight. So the spring pressure comes basically just from the water flowing out the nozzle. So this is another weight savings modification. And I think if anything, it works better than the original. So I'm very pleased with this. Not sure what I'm going to do next. I'm thinking of tackling the steering and actually turning the steering column into a solid aluminum shaft and welding it to the upper cast part. Making one out of aluminum probably isn't the best idea, considering the fact that people do break them off even when they're stainless steel. My thought is that I might be able to actually make one that there's no step down in it. So it's actually 25mm all the way through. So instead of stepping down to 7/8 and making that break point where it steps down, going all the way through, that would mean mounting the steering piece here, the blue piece, in my lathe, cutting the inside of it out larger and making new bushings to fit a 1-inch shaft. The last time I had this out for testing, I had the lanyard switch just taped onto the handlebar with a tie wrap around the wire. So I'm going to attempt to mount this, not permanently because there's going to be a cowl put on here eventually, but semi-permanently. I'm going to make a bracket for this. I'm going to make a little bracket that goes onto here, use this bolt, and bolt it on so that my switch mounts right on here, right in front of me. Seems like a pretty good location, and there's already a spot there to mount it to, so why not, right? There we go, a bracket for my tether switch. I've left a little tab on it so that it can engage with the housing here when I tighten it up so that it doesn't just want to rotate. That way I'll be able to get it nice and tight, and it'll hold it in a position that kind of makes sense. So let's get it mounted up and get the switch installed. It is finished. Pretty happy with the way this turned out. It is fairly easy to get to, nice and sturdy. And I've got the wire run down through where there was an original, this is where the fuel shutoff valve was. And so there were actually 3 hoses going down through. This one now is for my bar warmers. This one is for the kill wire. The other one's plugged up. I've got a piece of fuel line wrapped around there just to make it a little bit more watertight. I'll probably put a small tie wrap around here just to stop it from moving around. The wire now comes down through here. The white wire will connect to the CDI to shut it off just like it did before, and the black wire will get grounded to this plate along with the ground wire from the CDI box. Those of you who are keen may have noticed in the intro that the modifications were already all here. Quite conveniently, they're all in one location, which makes it easy to film an outro and point out everything that I've done. I should mention that this stuff has been previously modified. Originally, the X2 has a dial on here with a push button, 2 giant stainless steel discs that's encased in plastic, and this main body piece here is a giant chunk of cast aluminum. There's a detent ball in it. It's just a whole mess. So I had already modified it and shaved a bunch of weight off of it. And now I was modifying the modification. Actually, this is the 3rd modification or 3rd iteration of modifying this, I believe. So we got that arm modified, shaved a bunch of weight, and if anything, it works a little better. It's a little bit more snug than it was before. I modified the stop. I put an aluminum washer on there that I made. We've got a barrel adjuster off the end of a throttle cable that is turned down as my bolt. We got the tether switch bracket made and installed, and the tether switch installed. So the good news is that this stuff is now done, and so when I get my engine together, I'll be able to head out onto the water without having to do any of this stuff. The bad news is that the cylinders that I ordered off eBay, despite the seller assuring me that they would be here quickly, are now showing that they will be here on June 2nd. June 2nd. That's not quick. Anyway, it is what it is. I'm going to continue playing with this, doing modifications. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do now. I'm starting to kind of run out of things that I want to get involved in. The problem is that if I get into something too deep and then I get the engine parts, it's not going to be ready to go out onto the water. Trying to work on a jet ski or shoot a video with a cat, it's amazing that I get anything done at all. I've been playing around with my Stator cover in the video where I cut a bunch of holes in it. Several of you left comments with concerns in that video. Some of you were concerned about water, which I'm not terribly concerned about. And some of you left comments about debris. It was Daniel Spencer who left a comment about debris and saying that I could use some stainless steel mesh. That actually got me thinking that if there is something that's magnetic inside of the hull, and it happens to attach itself to the flywheel, that could junk not only the stator, but the stator cover and possibly even the engine cases. So I'm not so confident about leaving it open anymore. So thanks to everyone who comments and is critical of my my modifications without being rude or snide about it. I have filled my stator cover with plasticine. Here it is, and the idea was to actually skin the outside of this in carbon fiber using the vacuum infusion process. There are a couple of problems with that, and I will get into them right now, try to get through it quickly. One is that skinning on this surface would not work out very well. Carbon fiber and fiberglass don't like to conform to very tight bends, and so there are several tight bends in around where the bolts go on and stuff that I can't really get rid of. And so this just wouldn't work very well with skinning. There would be air pockets and pools of epoxy. It wouldn't look good, and it wouldn't bond very well, probably wouldn't be sealed. Another problem is that I might have to, but I would want to remove
some of the carbon fiber around where the bolts go, just because I don't want the bolts being, the bolts squishing the carbon fiber around these areas. It might cause it to delaminate. And because I actually want the bolts making a electrical connectivity between the case and the stator cover. The stator is grounded to the cover, so the cover has to be connected to the engine. The third reason is that typically when you make a carbon fiber or fiberglass part, you make your mold all nice and shiny, and then you put your part in. When you remove the part from the mold, the surface that you see is the mold surface, which you have prepared nice and shiny, hopefully. This wouldn't work out that way at all because there is no mold. So I would be putting the carbon fiber over the piece, and then I would have to cover that carbon fiber in peel ply, infusion mesh, and then some other consumables, including the bag. And at the best, I would end up with a very rough surface from the peel ply. And worst case scenario, there would be a huge amount of wrinkles with epoxy pools and whatever. It just wouldn't look very good. So the option that I think I'm going to take, almost certainly, is making a sheet of carbon fiber, a very thin sheet of carbon fiber on a piece of glass or a mirror or something. And then I will cut it out into shapes and epoxy it in, probably from the backside, into all of these holes. It will be a little bit more time consuming, but in the end, it will look better. It will probably seal better, and I won't have to deal with worrying about getting a good connection with the stator to the engine. There are still several things that I want to do to the X2 to make it lighter and to make it work better overall, but those things will have to wait. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.